Welcome to the special video version of the Student Ministry Podcast, episode 76. Today we're going to be talking to John Decker. John is the man behind Every Student Sent, which is a unique community-based platform with a vision of connecting students to existing ministries, churches, and each other in order to propel them toward gospel-centered mission as they navigate and engage culture during college. Every Student Sent is an initiative of campus renewal, and not only is there a great database of campus ministries and churches within the range of most colleges and universities in America, which has already been helpful for our students, but also there are tons of resources to help train your students as they take their faith and hopefully share that with others on their campuses. I'm so excited for you to hear from John Decker today. Not only will you hear his story, but also the vision and the purpose behind Every Student Sent, but you'll also be able to hear about all the amazing resources they have for you and your students. Before we jump into that, we do want to thank you so much for listening to the Student Ministry Podcast. If you have the ability to, please like and subscribe. And please leave a positive review on your favorite podcast app. That just really helps us be able to spread the news of the Student Ministry Podcast. Also, we want to thank our sponsors of this episode of the Student Ministry Podcast. Our first sponsor is G-Shades. It's a youth ministry curriculum and teaching strategy focused on helping students see every life situation through the lens of the gospel. There's several options to fit everyone with 3 plans to choose from. This curriculum gives you the resources that you need to do what you do better. Do you need message outlines, a discussion guide, and a game? That's just $16 a month. If you're looking for a higher production value, including bumper videos, Instagram devotionals, and parent guides, that's $25 a month. And do you want an affordable youth ministry video curriculum that can help you increase your online reach during this pandemic? G-Shades has you covered for $36 a month. You will not find a better youth ministry video curriculum at that price point anywhere. G-Shades really sets itself apart by helping students see the gospel applies to every life situation that is out there. And if you want to find out more about Mike Haynes, the founder of G-Shades, you can check out episodes 32 and 55 of the Student Ministry Podcast. So go ahead and head over to gshades.org to download Season 3 of G-Shades Youth Ministry Curriculum. And be sure to use the promo code TSMPOD for the Student Ministry Podcast at checkout to get an extra 10% off. gshades.org and use the promo code TSMPOD. G-Shades, seeing life through the lens of the gospel. Also sponsoring this episode is MenHub Youth, which was actually developed by a fellow student pastor to help people like you and me. MenHub Youth helps you store and track student, staff, and parent info, as well as your attendance for all of your events. There are a lot of great features, but today I want to talk to you about groups. You can create managed groups by assigning specific students to it, or, and this is the really cool part, you can create smart groups that automatically filter the right students into it. You can use smart groups to see all the high school boys, or every student from a certain school, or even all the students that regularly attend on Sunday but have never been to a Wednesday in the last month. Smart groups are like a superpower. On its own, the app is only $5 on iOS and Android, and you can use it forever on that one device without ever having to pay again. But if you want to synchronize your database across multiple devices or with your leaders, you can sign up for the MenHub Sync service and support the Student Ministry Podcast by visiting menhubsync.com/SMP. That's minhubsync.com/SMP for Student Ministry Podcast. You can find the links for both G-Shades and MenHub in the podcast show notes. Thanks so much to G-Shades and MenHub for sponsoring this episode of the Student Ministry Podcast. All right, with all that being said, let's jump into this conversation with John Decker of Every Student Sent. Hey, John, thanks so much for being on the podcast today.
Hey, thanks for inviting me, Steve. I'm pretty excited about this, and I've enjoyed getting to know you also.
Absolutely. So, yeah, we've gotten to know each other a little bit, especially over the last few weeks, but kind of a little bit of our history goes back a few years, but maybe some of the podcast listeners have never heard of you and your resources today. So I'd love to start out before we jump into Every Student Sent to just hear your story, kind of where God's brought you over the years to get you to where you are today.
Sure, Steve. And I think some of this will be helpful and thread into the overall purpose of informing youth leaders. So I became a believer halfway through college. And I remember uh, the moment I received Christ, it was an amazing thing. I said, you can actually know God and sense his presence, and you're forgiven and you're going to live forever. Nobody knows this. We got to start telling people. So this is way back in the 1900s. But you know, it was like no one in our circle really knew that Jesus was alive. So we started telling people, and people came to faith. And there's kind of a little movement in our neighborhood, and to us, that was how the whole thing rolled. And that whole generation of us are still walking strongly with the Lord today. We noticed as we had teenagers and they're in a Christian school, hey, they're all loving the Lord. And thankfully, all my kids are walking with the Lord now. One of them is married to a FCA leader in New York State, and so it's good. But we noticed in the school and in the church that they didn't have that same fire and zeal to reach out to others, and also it carried through that when the youth leaders saw them going off to college, a huge number of them, like at least half, were just drifting away like really quickly, and their roots as juniors and seniors weren't always that sound. They had kind of a dual life sometimes and things like that. So noticing that, I got thinking, what is the way that God transfers he transfers his zeal from one generation to another. And I think the way that happens is by having them experience the life-changing power when they actually lead someone else to Christ, see the change, and grow and get a disciple. And I think until then, you don't really have the right, the total engagement. In fact, Greg Steer, one of our partners with Dare to Share, he says the beginning of discipleship can be evangelism, because that puts the zeal and the fire and the reason why you want to learn about all the aspects of discipleship, and why you might want to learn apologetics, and why you might learn to share. So, he's kind of inverted things, and we totally agree with that.
Yeah.
So to try to figure this out, my wife and I planted an InterVarsity chapter at Syracuse University. And we noticed that the Christian kids were hitting the social scene, and they just weren't doing very well. They would get kind of pulled away by their friends, really rapidly. And then we learned about the 70% statistic that Barnett and others quoted, that this is why we can see firsthand why that is happening. So the other thing we noticed is that the non-believers were kind of parachuting in for the first time in their life. They're not connected to any peer group. They're just alone, and they're ready to reinvent themselves, try new things, meet new people. And we saw, what would it be like in America if we're normal for high school juniors and seniors to really lean forward into college and be excited about how to engage, and if they could land on campus and participate in what we call the sweet spot, those first few weeks when the new freshmen are just open to anything.
Yeah.
So this really crystallized when we learned about an InterVarsity chapter in Geneseo, New York, a little south of Syracuse, where a student got radically transformed right in the beginning of freshman orientation. I mean, he was set free. He was telling other people. He went from darkness to light. And these students, probably for the first time, saw that. And they said, wow, that's amazing what God can do with one of our peers. So they partnered with that kid, and they ended up leading 26 other kids to the Lord in that dorm that semester.
Wow.
I mean,
that's incredible.
It's like a mini revival,
Yeah.
It was like, I think of it like popcorn going off. Visible change leads to visible change leads to visible change.
Yeah.
And so right time, right place. And so we imagine when they go home for Christmas, they go back to their youth group or their Christian school, and they go, hey guys, now we really understand this walking with Jesus thing. It's all about life transformation and helping your friends. We're doing it. You can do it too. So in our cycle, we actually program this in. We encourage them to go back for a college experience night and help activate their youth group and say, this would be a great time to adopt a Christian school, and use, any of the resources that are available with many of the ministries that do that. So knowing that, and thinking about that, I then was headed off to staff conference, university staff conference in 2008 in St. Louis. And I remember during worship, the Lord really spoke to me. He said, I want you to start, transitioning away from your job. I was working at Lockheed Martin and, transition, or I guess then it was maybe Phillips, but transition away from your telecom and your aerospace world. And I'd like you to try to help make this happen. So I started, transitioning. And first I started working with Young Life and InterVarsity. I thought maybe these two could couple. And I found the Young Life campaigners were really hungry for something like this. And so I go to the meetings early in the morning, and they would gravitate towards it. And we worked with some of the local universities. So then I thought, well, you have to create a website and do all this, work, and it's a lot of work. So I was looking for partners. I did discover one in Arizona that ran with this for a while, that actually was kind of leading the way in this, but they eventually phased out. So come to pass, over a number of years, kind of keeping this going and doing a tent maker job in the meantime, I found Campus Renewal in Austin, Texas. I bumped into them, and they were really game to do this. In fact, they'd been thinking about something very similar. So I could see, God pulling this together. So we hooked up with them, and they raised some funding, built a website called Campus Ministry Link at the time, and and ran with that. And then about 14 months ago, we launched Every Student Sent, which is whole new technology. It's actually a social platform, and we'll talk about that more on the podcast. But that works really well. So that's kind of my story.
That's cool. That's awesome. I love how, it really started from your experience with campus ministry, like your own story. Like this is where God grabbed you, and now you're trying to inspire and put resources into other students' hands to replicate that as much as possible. And I think I found the same thing. It's really interesting, that zeal question. Like, how can we actually replicate that zeal for Jesus and zeal for sharing him with others? Which is really cool to see how Campus Ministry Link has now evolved into Every Student Sent, and all the resources you guys have, not only to put campus ministries in students' hands and say, here's what's out there so you can get involved, but also here are some great resources for you to actually share your faith and get out there and proclaim God's greatness on your campus. So walk us through a little bit about what Every Student Sent really is. I kind of dove into it just a little bit there, but I know that there's so much more. What actually is Every Student Sent, and what is the entire platform?
Sure. So it's a platform that pulls together partners. So we have a coalition of some of the major denominations, really all the major college ministries, and a growing number of the smaller college ministries. They've partnered with us, a number of youth ministries, NMYM, Dare Share, things like that, Alpha Youth. And so it's this platform to work together to make it normal in America for all students to lean forward into college, and to anticipate it with some joy and enthusiasm, get them prepared, and then create that experience during the first weeks of college. So then the other side of it is really helping students learn to multiply. You might call it a disciple-making movement. It's ways to learn how to share the gospel, disciple someone, lead them, help them replicate, even to create expressions of the church in their dorm, to take that. So, or their high school. So, that whole process of being a full disciple means you're a disciple maker.
So what are some of those features that Every Student Sent has that makes that possible?
When you go on the site, one of the first things you want to do is say, as a student, you search for any college in the U.S. And what will pop up is ministries and churches that are there. So all the major ministries, Young Life, Cru, Navigators, Chi Alpha, InterVarsity, et cetera, have given us their data. And so because of that, we're replicated on most campuses in the U.S. So you'll find those. And then where campuses, so when you get engaged in a community, then local churches find out about it. They can be on there too. And we really encourage local churches, and we'd love you to, encourage your listeners to, they can register on Every Student Center and apply to be a church if they serve a college campus, so that when kids are searching for a college, they can find a church too. So you find that, and then what the next step is, you click on message the leaders. So then you can start actually messaging and talking to the leaders or pastors on these campuses, and get to know them. A student might say, "Hey, I'm a junior. We're thinking about going to UT Austin, and I'd like to know more about your group and just the pulse of things going on in campus. And by the way, I'm a chemistry major. Do you have any chem majors in your group? I'd love to hear about that program from the side of one of the students." And so they get this engagement going, this discussion. It's both in the platform, kind of like a text conversation, but it's also kicked out to email, so you can pick up these emails and follow it that way. So that's the first thing. And then the next thing is, you can look at the members in the group, or even at a total college level. So you can see the incoming students that are already starting to engage there. And what happens is, you can start building a team, so you don't go to college alone anymore. You're going with a whole raft of students that are looking towards college, have been at least somewhat trained and kind of ready to go. And so you can find potential roommates, study partners, mission partners, things like that, and just friendships. So it's way better than going to college alone and just having to start from scratch. So hey, my friend's in this dorm and this friend's in that dorm. And then the leaders, the youth leaders or the campus ministers, they get to interface with them and talk to the students and start helping to disciple them. They can send them video materials. There's actually Zoom integrated with the group, so they can do a Zoom meeting with them, sending them information, and start to get conversations going in this little social network around that particular college. And especially show them that, hey, there's a sweet spot the first 2 weeks of college. Let's get organized. Jerry and Joe, you're in dorm A. Maybe you want to go out and do a ultimate frisbee game and invite some of your friends, and then bring them over to small group or large group or something like that. So use that first period when engagement is really real.
Yeah.
And then basically you're in that social group. And so that's the thread. And like I said, you could also look at a college level and see all the incoming freshmen at a college level, not just that particular group. So the next thing is, you want to help 10th to 12th graders get excited about college. So how do you do that? Well, some of it is stories on the site that show how God is moving. Actually, we're working like with InterVarsity and Cru and Chi Alpha, and they're saying more students are coming to faith on a college campuses now than any time since the 70s Jesus movement.
Wow.
So, that's a couple years ago, and even now through the pandemic.
Wow.
So, show them stories about what God is doing. And so we have courses on the site that have stories from students and like some national leaders. We got like the last one, we had a couple from NAMB, Shane Pruitt and Paul Worcester and others. We got Alpha and so on. They're sharing stories, and they get to learn from these stories and student stories. So that helps a youth leader use those resources to sit down with a student and get a great discussion, show a video, talk with them. I remember there was a youth leader in Lubbock, Texas, a number of years ago, when kind of an early pilot version. He was going through the typical thing where juniors and seniors start falling away from the group. They're still probably coming to church on Sundays with their parents, but because they got a car. It's exciting. They're starting to get jobs and sports and things like that. So they started using these concepts and really talking to students about their needs, the things that were them, leaning forward into their future with college, talking about the practical things, even their career and things of that nature. And the students really loved it. They started inviting back their attrited friends, and they also started inviting other friends that even hadn't come. So the group actually grew in the seniors and juniors, because
Wow.
of that. So that's kind of amazing.
Yeah. That's
Encouraging
incredible.
story.
Yeah.
Um, what else? So the training, yeah. So we have the training videos, and another thing is most youth leaders could tell you right away whenever I talk with them. I said, "Do you have students that are especially motivated and really want to serve the Lord and invite others and looking for some adventure?" It says, "Okay, here's what you can do. There's a mobilizers link on the site where they get invited into a student mobilizers group, and they get pulled into a national group. They get interface with other on fire students as far as mobilizers. They get to go to a monthly meeting. They get some individual training. When we have national events, they get invited into a green room and meet some of the well-known speakers that they probably already know and interface with them. And there's a bunch of things in that really helps them. The benefit to a church is they can then be the student leaders that start this student movement in the church. I mean, really what you want to always go after, of course, and you espouse this all the time, youth ministry is student leaders. So this helps them be the student leaders in the sense that we really want to grow and be mature because we want to make an impact on college campuses.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah.
Another thing is that you find, well, I'll tell you a little story. So kind of in the prototype ways, we were working with Black Rock Church in Connecticut. You probably know Black Rock, right? Because you used to be from there. So the youth leader had us come in, and we did like a 1-day session with them, showing them how to connect, showing them, and actually with parents and students, showing them how to connect and so on. So the students did all connect, and they were actually measuring prior to this. They were very astute about this. They're measuring this approximate 70% loss, saying, yeah, it's about what we're seeing every year. And a lot of them are falling away right in the first semester. So after that, they found that everyone in the junior and senior class connected, and they all thrived and survived that year. And they came back with there's some videos on our site about that. They came back and really started encouraging the church. They did some amazing things on college, and they actually, without even being told to, they came back at Christmas and energized their students.
That's cool.
So there's a way, there's just encouraging youth leaders that these are some of the benefits to just help, one other thing besides all the things you're sharing, to bring together vibrancy in their group, and then bring the graduated seniors back for Christmas and help energize them.
Yeah, that's so cool. And I love how hopefully if it goes well, it just keeps going, flipping over every year, and there's more students getting energized, coming back. And there's just this cycle that starts up. One of the things that I've loved about Every Student Sent so far, and how we've used it is that ability to put that information in students' hands. I mean, even if it's as simple, if you don't use the entire site, just to be able to see what campus ministries and what churches are in the area for the colleges that you're looking at, and be able to connect with them. And I've told several of our students and our parents, as we meet with them every year, is that they're getting ready to graduate, to say, like, as you're looking at colleges, I would love if our students eventually get to the point where they're making their list of criteria for the school they're looking at, maybe locations on there, major, size of school, all that stuff. But I would love it if we can get to the point where college ministry or campus ministry available is at the top of that list. That if the school matches up with your major, size, all these different things, location, but they don't have a campus ministry, or they don't have a place where you can get involved and not only grow in your faith, but also have an opportunity to share your faith, and maybe that school's not for you. And being able to kind of put these resources in their hands, we're able to set them up to know what ministries are in that area, so that they can actually get involved, but also inspire them and equip them and empower them to go out and share their faith as well. So that's really cool for us to to be able to aspire for that goal, like this is a great resource. How have you specifically seen Every Student Sent have an impact on specifically youth workers, students, and even parents?
Yeah, sure. And let me just mention a couple other features that'll
Sure.
play into that question. So one thing is a youth leader can actually upload their students, so they can just create an Excel file, upload juniors, seniors, maybe 10th graders, and what that does is it gives them they can opt in, the students, so they're volitionally opting in. But once they're there, you have a dashboard that you can see their progress. Are they engaging with the system? Are they inviting others? Are they connecting with other ministries? So you know who's really being helped and who may need a little assistance. So
Yeah.
that's a big plus. And I'd like to say that also, although all or most, we found a few gaps, but most of the public schools in the United States have been loaded into our system. So when a student signs up, and they usually indicate on their registration which high school they come from, that actually puts them into a group at that high school. So over time, you'll be able to see in the high schools the different students that are there, and you as a youth leader can actually join that too, or your church, and Young Life and FCA can be part of it. So at that school, there's a group of students that are kind of leaning forward into college at each high school, right?
That's
So
cool.
that's a nice thing. So
That is cool. I'll actually just say I love how you've also incentivized that a little bit to like make some progress in there, and you see that on the dashboard as well. To like there's incentives to keep it going, whether it be badges or whatever. That like, okay, this is I want to make this progress and everything. It's not just just something to do, but there's some incentive behind it beyond just the opportunity to share the gospel. So that's really cool.
Yep. Yeah. So in terms of helping youth workers, so we've seen, first thing is, you can add your church. So then that way you can be attracting other students. It might be for your young adult group, but, be coming into church from the college. And then, as we said, this idea when students need something very tangible to help them go forward. I've mentioned all the kind of the face sides of getting excited about going to college and everything. So that will help energize your group. There's also some practical things. There's resources on the site to help students and parents figure out the right career and direction. So we partner with Crown Financial Ministries, Career Direct, and we'll be adding some others. And so this gives practical ways to help them. That's very, in that point, that's exactly what the students are doing. What college do I apply to? What's my major going to be? Well, they need help then. And how cool is it if a student can hear from the Lord, find their direction, and they actually understand how that can eventually go forward into serving eventually. So sometimes some people use the term the 7 mountains of society of culture. So the idea is let them think now, and we're actually partnering with business ministries to help with the transition from college to the workplace. But think now how God might use you. You can refine that during college, and then exactly how you can get plugged in and influence society. So that's cool. There's also assistance in there to keep students out of college debt. I mean, there's so many stories I've heard about, you graduate and you want to go into ministry and you can't because the ministry has a debt ceiling for that. Or you marry somebody with a huge amount of debt, and then you're starting off your life with a huge amount of stress. Or you're living at home for another 3 or 4 years, until you can afford to buy a house, or you can't buy a house for, additional 5 years. So, so there's real practical resources on there to help them, avoid the debt and so on. So these are kind of some tangible things that you can talk about. Parents
Absolutely.
love this too, and we'll talk a bit about parents later.
Yeah.
What else? Well, it's just there's a benefit that you don't want to lose the student. You poured all this into. Why have 40, 50, 60, 70% of them wash out when they go to college? Let's pour into them and make sure that happens. But not just that they can become disciple makers. So the best defense is a good offense. right? So,
Yep.
if you go to college and just see how can I be safe and not touch the world and not be infected, that's not going to work very well. It's really, you got to lean forward and saying, like Jesus, I want to help other people. I want to love
Mm.
them with the love of Jesus. So that gives them strength. Um, the and I said the training material, gives you a set of curriculum, and there's more and more we're adding to help, work with your students. This is an open platform, so there's more and more things being added. For instance, you can there's social, in addition to the social groups for your church, for the school, so you can have social groups there. But some of our partners are creating social groups on there. For instance, if you type in Dare to Share, you'll find a social group built around that. So these are people that are getting discipled by Dare to Share, but kind of in a team talking to each other and then hey, how can we apply this when we go to college?
Mm.
Right. The same with Claim Your Campus. The same with Alpha. Alpha is interesting because if students can really learn to run Alpha in youth, in as a youth, then they really know how to apply it when they land on college as a new freshman. Invite
Yeah.
their roommates over.
Yeah.
So those things like that. And we invite pastors, youth leaders, ministries out there that are hearing this. You can do the same thing. Like I said, it's open platform. Just reach out to me, or you can just see how it's done on the platform, and you can express that.
That's really cool. Yeah, I love that. I love the idea behind it. You're basically just putting these resources and tools in people's hands to think outside the walls of their church, outside the walls of their ministry. Like, we are in this together. And so I love that there's even, organizations that like Dare to Share that are beyond just one church that are there. And it really creates this unity idea. Like, we are going out there to many different college campuses as one church, not just my local church, but together and able to hopefully, spread the gospel together with a bunch of other Christians that are probably coming from all around the world to this one campus. Hopefully with the same goal of not only to get a great education, but also to be used by God while you're there for those few years. So that's really cool. I love how you mentioned parents stuff, like, because that was this one thing when we were talking a couple of weeks ago that really stood out to me that I didn't realize was on there. You guys have a lot of resources to help parents. So that's probably one of the big things that I'd love for you to share. Like, what is there for parents? Because like, we can get the parents pulled in, then the students are getting on there, they're checking it out and everything, and it's the whole family involved in this.
Yeah. Parents are so key God has actually obviously instilled them as the main disciple makers for their own students, and they love their students, and they want to see them do well. So that's sticky. Parents learn about this, get involved. They really get involved. And using this, a couple things happen. They can work with their students and start doing the college search together. It says, well, let's not look at a college that doesn't have good college ministries, right? Or if we're making a decision between a Christian college or a secular college, maybe you can help them to do that. So they're engaged in that whole college search process. And then, as we said, the college major and career, well, they're really embedded with it. That last couple of years before you go to college is a key time. The students are becoming young adults. They're getting a little more mature. Before they go away to college, it's a key time to really gain traction with your students and something they're interested in, rather than just, one word answers and things like that you sometimes get from teens. Right. So parents love that. And so, so really helping them to discover their purpose. We said we've got something on there from Career Direct, but we're adding others. Who knows a student better than a parent, right? Mm-hmm. And so can work together with the parent to do that. And there's also parent groups. So you can go on and interface with other parents around the nation that are into the same thing. There's a parents in prayer group. There's a student that we get on every 2 weeks with parents, and they're praying together for each other and for the campuses and things like that. As we said, the student debt resources, they love that because everyone is struggling. Wow, look at this crazy cost of college. $70,000 for 1 year. Oh, what's with that? So it's very effective. There's ways actually to negotiate lower college prices and and do very organized interviews with a department head that can put leverage on financial aid. Very practical things there.
Yeah.
So and then parents often, as a youth leader, if you get the parents energized around this, they can help spread it to other students, other parents. Maybe they'll help you with your youth group, because they're really bought into it, and they can invite other parents. And of course, within any church, there's more students that the church touches than they're just in the youth group.
Absolutely. Yep.
But so every parent, you're touching that student and bringing them in.
Yeah, that's really cool. Yeah, I've already got some names of parents that I'm already taking some notes. I'm like, okay, these are couple key parents that I'm going to get on board with me. Trying to really push this platform even further with our group too, because I think that's huge. I love not only the resources you put in there, but I love hearing that there's an opportunity for parents to connect, because that's one of the things that I found within our ministry is that parents are just not naturally connected to each other, and they're all struggling. They're all going through hard times, trying to figure out things. And we need those places where they can actually rub shoulders with each other and share stories, what worked, what didn't work, pray together, and just help other parents out to find that community. So that's really cool that it's that full inclusive idea. It's not just, we're targeting students, but you're targeting the entire family to come on board as well.
Yeah. And you and parents can create a subgroup just for your church or for your community or for your school to get that parent interaction going.
That's really cool. So thinking about the future of Every Student Sent, you guys do so much already. What are the goals for Every Student Sent now?
Well, the overall goal, so it's been, demonstrated on individual churches and so on, that you can reverse the 70%. So we're really trying to scale this nationally. We're in right now in the beginning of a thrust to do digital advertising, bring on more partners, work through our denominational partners. But I would say for youth leaders, and so we're working with NNYM, for instance. So going through the information so people can know about it. But if you think of NNYM, they're centered around cities. So we have what we call a city movement strategy. The idea is you get a couple pastors in a city to really get on fire about, invite other pastors, right? And then in Christian schools. So God always moves, whether it was in Jerusalem or Antioch or Samaria, or Ephesus, he always moves within a city. So we're trying to tap into that and create. We have a city movement page. You can go on. You can see some of the cities that we've started this process with, and we'd be glad to do this in any city or encourage like your youth group within your city. We can meet with them, set up a Zoom conference with them, and just help them work through the nuts and bolts on, what are the benefits and how do you get this going in your city. So that's one thing. And we want to engage more deeply with churches and Christian schools, because it's always a two-way learning process. I mean, this is something God's doing. And so you never know what you're going to find out until you talk with somebody else. So we learn, as we engage with churches, we learn things too in Christian schools. So we want to just engage deeply and, figure out totally how to solve this problem with youth and really energize them. The overall goal, as I said, with cities, is that if you mobilize the whole city, you could see double the number of active Christian freshmen on a college campus. If you've done this, we know it works church by church. If you did it within a whole city, you could double the number of active freshmen on a campus. And if you help them be engaged and know how to be disciple makers, by the time they graduate, there should be at least triple the number of kingdom-minded college graduates to go out. And so, as I said, we're trying to work with the business ministry to help catch when they go out and help them disciple there. So the harvest is plentiful, the laborers are few. We all need more laborers. So I'd say this movement is something that helps every other ministry, because we're creating laborers. In 4 or 5 years, there could be that many more laborers engaged and ready to help your city.
Yeah.
So the city movement is big. We're We're working on an app to finish the app version of this. Of course, students love apps, and that's always powerful. Adding more resources and training, and adding more denominational partners, things like that. So it's just making it broader and deeper and better. And as I said, it's an open platform. Different people contact us, and they've got a great ministry or idea. They can jump on and be part of this.
Yeah, that's so cool. And like I said, it's amazing to see how much it's grown over the time that I've known about it. And I feel like, you guys are continue to add more and more resources and more great things that you can put in students' hands, youth leaders' hands, parents' hands, campus ministry hands. That's so great. And to be able to see how this could actually impact the bigger movement is so great. So I know people are going to want to check it out and everything. So what are the next steps for youth workers that have been hearing about it? Where do they go from here?
Well, first they can go to everystudentsent.org. They can log on as a youth leader, and then there's an engage menu there. So in the engage menu, we'll have pages set for every different user type. They have one for churches and youth leaders. We have one for Christian schools, one for students, business people. And so wherever you are, you can go there, and there's kind of a step-by-step on what to do and how to fully engage. You can also contact me. My contact information is on there. It's john.decker@everystudentsent.org, and reach out to me. And I'd love to chat with you on phone or Zoom and assist. We all the time we work with churches and schools and do kind of an intro Zoom to get them up to speed, and we're willing to do things with a group. You can speak to a whole group over Zoom.
Nice. That's awesome. So John, we love to give our guests an opportunity. You have an audience of youth workers. You've already shared a ton of wisdom and resources today, but I'd love to give you an opportunity to share maybe a tip or two, or maybe some encouragement for the youth workers that are out there.
I'd say some encouragement is reflect on this and other things, and realize that God is moving in new ways. He is bigger and better than the pandemic and everything else. And that the fact that there is this interest for this coalition to, what if we do really reverse the 70% loss in America? What's that going to mean to our society and our churches? And be encouraged about that, and just be proactive. Think about ways to use this as a networking tool to expand the network, and that you don't have to have grieving parents over their wayward kids anymore. That's a burden to see these parents that all they do is go to prayer meetings to pray for their wayward parents. Well, let's try to avoid that, and let's give you all the joy and fruit of seeing your students go off to college. In fact, in that dashboard that I showed you, you can actually track them into college and stay in communication with them. So that's a huge thing. So I'd say it's a kind of a message of hope, what God's doing. And as I said, on college campuses, more students are coming to faith than ever. Raise that hope. Let's, it's a God thing. Be encouraged.
Yeah, that's so good. So good a reminder. I think a lot of times, especially in the middle of a pandemic and trying to rethink ministry, how does this all work and everything? Sometimes it's easy to forget that we're in this for the kingdom, for disciple making purposes, and to spread the word specifically through the next generation. And that's great. So just a great reminder of why we do this, and to keep after it for sure. And to use great resources like you guys are providing and continuing to provide to just do that even better. So thank you so much, John, for being on the podcast today, and for all that you guys do through Every Student Sent and everything else that you've done. I just pray that God blesses all that you're doing.
Thanks a lot, Steve. And the founding ministry of this is campusrenewal.org. You can check that out too, and the leadership there. So that's something to think about also.
Well, thanks so much to you all for listening to this episode of the Student Ministry Podcast. And thanks so much to John Decker. And also thanks to our sponsors. Be sure to check out gshades.org and use the promo code TSMPOD at checkout to receive 10% off your order. Also, be sure to head over to menhubsync.com/SMP to check out MenHub and also support the Student Ministry Podcast. Thanks to both G-Shades and MenHub for sponsoring this episode of the Student Ministry Podcast. And thanks again to all of you for being here for this episode of the Student Ministry Podcast. Be sure to share this with others who you think would enjoy it, and may God bless your ministry.